Hey, let's talk about copywriting. A lot of people get hung up on writing. In person, they're fantastic salespeople. On the phone, they're fantastic salespeople. But when it comes to writing, something happens. They transform into this boring old monster, and it doesn't really work. Their ideas don't flow, and they get stuck in what they're trying to say. So today, I'm here to try and help unlock some of that by giving you some of the training tips that I use with the sales teams that we consult with. My name is Dan McDermott. I'm the CMO here at Voris. I've been training copywriters for years. I've been a copywriter myself for the past 15 years in many different roles, many different companies, and as a consultant for a very long time, it feels like. And I've trained people at all levels. I'm a strong believer that anybody can write strong copy. And as salespeople, I think that everybody should be able to write strong copy and feel comfortable and confident in doing so. So without further ado, let's jump into the 10 steps that you could take right away to become a better writer. Step number 1, this is a mindset thing. Writing is a skill. A lot of people treat writing like some sort of innate natural talent that people either have or don't have. They get very sort of precious about, their skills and their abilities to even learn the craft. And in all honesty, you learn skills all the time. It's not a big deal. Think about languages, music, sports. These are all things that are skills that you learned through repetition. And what you have to do with writing, if you are not an experienced writer, is to sit down and create a schedule for yourself to practice. In our industry, a lot of people grab some templates, get some stuff from their managers, basically get handed a bunch of copy in some sort of form, copy paste it into some sort of template, send it, call that an email. In my opinion, it's not really great practice because you didn't really write anything. I mean, you adding one little line of personalization on top of a canned email, it's not really writing. The most minor level thing that you could do. Instead, it's a good idea to sit down once a week and to really start banging out your own drafts of specific messages. And if you want to get even more detailed, look to specific people when you write. So when you're writing something to a prospect on LinkedIn, for example, pull up that person's profile, write a blank email, start with a blank email and just write it. And just that act once a week is going to set you on the right path to practicing your own thinking and not just taking it from somebody else. We're going to get into that in a future step as well too. So step number 2, this is also a mindset thing. That's the idea that not everything's going to work. Expect failure. And what I mean by that is this. We are in an industry where we are going to be doing a lot of the same thing over and over. We're going to be sending a lot of sales emails out. We're going to be sending a lot of follow-up emails out. We're going to be sending a lot of emails and messages of various sorts out on a daily basis. Not everything is going to hit. Not everything is going to hit with everybody, and not everything is going to hit with everybody at the same time. That's a good thing. You can remove some pressure from yourself, because if you are sitting down expecting to write the perfect thing every single time, you're going to sit at the computer for hours with a blinking cursor, a blank document, just sitting there waiting for the ideas to magically appear in your head. That's not the way it works, right? Think about Michael Jordan, for example. There's that famous quote, for every shot that he makes, he's missed 1,000, something like that. Even the bands with a lot of hits, like the Beatles, right? Or the Red Hot Chili Peppers, that was one I heard recently. They have a lot of good songs, right? But think about all the other stuff that didn't hit. The jam sessions, the songs that you just don't remember, and even the stuff that didn't even make it to the jam session. The point is, with all these creators, they're actively creating. They are not expecting everything to be perfect, and they're expecting to make thousands of the same thing. With that in mind, maybe you should sit down and start practicing your writing without that pressure on yourself. So step number 3 here, this is the third and final mindset little bit here. Stop copy pasting. Stop looking for templates. We're all guilty of this to some degree, where we can ask the internet for help, and lately ChatGPT and other AI tools. But the problem with that is, if you're constantly looking for things to just grab from place A and stick into place B, it's missing context, it's missing you, and it's probably not even relevant for your market. If you think about grabbing an email template from somebody sending out stuff to restaurant owners, selling them information about POS systems, versus somebody who is going to be sending out emails to an accountant about project management software. Totally different messaging. And as I mentioned before, if you are sending the same thing to everybody, you're going to reach nobody. Your message is diluted, you're probably irrelevant, the person probably doesn't like you very much, they probably feel like they're being bugged. Whereas if you're taking your time to really tailor and write genuine, real, specific messages to people, addressing their specific needs at a specific time, well, that's going to be a totally different experience. It's okay to use some templates and to use, even ChatGPT to get some ideas out there and to brainstorm. But when it comes to really creating, I still think it's a good idea that you create your own templates and frameworks and not rely on other people, and definitely don't just blindly copy paste. All right, we're into the research section. Step number 4 is really simple. It is keep a swipe file. If you're unfamiliar with what a swipe file is, it's very simple. It's just a folder where you stick a bunch of stuff that you think is memorable and relevant to your market. So in my case, I like to use Google Drive. It's a digital folder. and I just collect emails, LinkedIn messages, and other pieces of copy from websites that I find relevant. I also happen to track ads for myself. That's something separate probably from what you're doing. I also like to keep a folder where I call it X, where it's just the bad stuff. And it's bad emails, bad messages, things that are breaking all the rules that I like to keep just because it's good to have examples of things that are probably not getting the greatest responses, and the things that actually upset me when I received them. I use that because I like to break it down later. That's a little bit of a bonus point if you want to try that out, but at least collect things that you are receiving that you like, and also save your own stuff that you like into that swipe file. It's very simple, and it's something that should just be in the background for you as a resource. For me personally, if I still get stuck on a particular idea, if I'm spending more than a couple minutes and I just can't really get something out, then I'll just go to the swipe file, pop it open, have a quick sort of browse through it, and then my brain will do the rest, and it'll kick into gear at that point. I promise you it works. All professional copywriters that I know keep a swipe file, and I suggest that you start doing the same for yourself. Our SDR here, he does this with memes, and it's fantastic. It is one of the best creativity tools that you can possibly build for yourself. And that's key. You got to build it for yourself. You can't just take it from somebody else. That's the beauty of it. All right, step number 5, it is to stay on top of your industry trends, keeping yourself informed of what's going on in your space. Now, you don't have to go crazy with this, but in general, it's a good idea once a week to just have a real quick browse over the major articles, the major sort of news that you're getting. I like to use an RSS feed. I use Feedly, but you can use a ton of other tools out there to essentially deliver me relevant news in my inbox on a weekly basis. I just look through that stuff quickly. I'll sift through if I find something interesting. I'll obviously go deeper and read into it. But it's just a good practice because on calls, in email conversations, in any sort of communication you have with prospects, you never know what's going to come up. They might ask you questions, and look, you're not expected to know every single detail of every single thing that is always happening in the industry or even with your product. That's not the point. The point is to be able to react intelligently to what's actually happening in your space and to be able to engage in an intelligent conversation with the person you're speaking to. Knowing what's going on right now is a great way to do that. Giving somebody an extra resource to read is a great way to do that. I've actually closed deals this way, actually significant deals that started off on LinkedIn conversations because I had relevant information kind of bouncing around in my head that I could engage with somebody else's social content. I had that information, that article, that link ready to go. And the impact is significant. So try it out once a week, not a big time suck, spend a few minutes on it, and it should be one of those big needle movers for you. Step number 6, that's to engage with the right people on the right platform. What I mean by that is on social media, your audience probably hangs out somewhere online, right? For us here at Voris, it's probably LinkedIn is our best channel, but if you're in B2B, it's probably LinkedIn, but you never know. It could be Twitter, it could be even Reddit. There's so many options out there. You probably know your industry pretty well, and I would expect that you immediately know which platform to focus on. The key there is to build a conscious list of people that you are actively following and engaging with. If you just let the algorithm slowly figure it out for itself, you're going to be stuck getting a lot of garbage content. And you know what they say, garbage in, garbage out. Whereas if you're following really smart, really plugged in, for lack of a better term, influencers, voices, thought leaders in your industry, that's another way, like in the previous step, to get on track with what the latest conversations are. So it's not just what the news is, but also how are people reacting to it? How do people feel about it? Who has a contrarian take? Who has a really strong opinion? If you're able to sort of see that, you'll get your own idea of what's happening more fleshed out. You'll develop your own opinions a little bit deeper, but you also have a chance to engage in front of people in a way that shows some expertise and that's valuable to them as well. It's a great way to learn for yourself. And if you're doing both of those steps actively, you'd be surprised how quickly your own writing will improve because you suddenly are able to speak to specific points that are timely, relevant, and focused. That's key. If you're not able to do that, you sort of end up in kind of vague generality land, and nobody wants to be there because then you become kind of a replaceable robot like everybody else. With that in mind, think about the top 10 people on your feed right now. Are they who you want to be following? Odds are maybe you want to tweak it. I have a list of my own top 10 that I consistently go back to and review. And the best way to do that is on LinkedIn and Twitter. You can set alerts to see their posts as soon as they're published. If you do that for your list, you can always chop and change the list later on when you find new voices, when you want to replace somebody's voice. But the key is there, again, do you see a theme developing here? Make it your own thing. Don't just blindly follow, for example, my 10 people. You and I have different contexts. Between your work reading up on the news and also reading up on people's opinions, publication, and thoughts, you'll have a great ability of your own to engage in conversations and think on your feet. Step number 7. Now we're getting into some more of the skill-based stuff. And this one I like to call practice with purpose. You'll see in general, if you Google how to become a better copywriter or how to become a copywriter, you know, all those terms on Google, you'll get stuff associated with copy work, which is the idea that you should go back to old ads or old sales letters, old emails even, and copy them by hand so that, by osmosis, I guess, learn, how to write. I think there's a little bit of value in that. I don't totally discount it, but I think you should do that for like a couple days or maybe a week. And then you should stop randomly copying some stuff from 50 years ago and start basically doing the same thing for what's working right now. Remember that swipe file I told you about? Once you build that, you have your own database of things to copy work. So that's where you can kind of go back to something that worked for you, that you reacted well to. Okay, why did you react well to it? Don't just take it as gospel that because somebody wrote a great sales letter 50 years ago, you have to study it and then somehow adapt that to what is way too many jumps. What you should do is look at what's working right now in your space, on your team even. You can look at your teammates' emails. You can look at great emails that collectively around you people have saved, and then go back to those ones. Why did they work? What stood out about them? Basically practice specifically. What kind of hook did they use? What kind of subject line did they write? What kind of CTA did they ask for? What was the tone of the message? You can look at these specific things and be very mindful when you're rewriting them, when you're studying them. That's where you're going to learn. I don't think you're going to get very much out of if you have the TV on in the background and I don't know, a bunch of action happening over here, a bunch of noise happening over there, and then you've got 2 documents open and you're writing something out by hand. I don't think you really learn very much that way. But you will if you really break down what you're focused on learning. That's why in your swipe file it might not be a bad idea to start organizing, as you can see in mine, where I have stuff built out basically for hooks, CTAs, and then images. Beyond that, if you get those 3 right, your voice and tone should naturally follow. Step number 8, this one's a good one. It's to constrain yourself. The use of constraints is a great way to focus your writing and focus your mind, focus your creativity. The idea of endlessness is very dangerous because then we write endlessly. There's a lot of pressure. How much should I write? Ask me for a word count. Should it be long, short? Should I write about this or that? It's not a great way to give somebody structure. And the best way you can give structure to yourself is to sort of say, okay, for this email, I'm going to limit myself to 50 words or less, let's say. For this post, I'm only going to write 100 words. The more you're able to limit yourself, the more you have to force yourself to communicate more directly and more succinctly. There's also time limitation. There's subject limitation. It's not just word count. I think those are the 3 dimensions. Limiting your words, limiting your topics, and limiting the time taken to do this. So for timing, I like to use something called tomato timer. It's a Pomodoro timer, so it's set for 25 minutes, but you can also adjust it. Put it for 10 minutes. Sit down, write. What do you get? It'll force you to just move more quickly. And that's, I think, really at its core, the big problem with most people in terms of what they have with writing. It's that they don't give themselves a time limit. So put yourself in check with a time limit, with a word count. I think that helps. Or, at least size-wise. Is it a tweet? Is it a page? Just figure it out and commit to it. And then lastly, how big of an idea are you trying to bite off? My best way to sort of look at this, if you write an outline for yourself and you find yourself doing nested bullet points where, it's the type that we all did in high school to impress our teachers. Look at all these points I'm going to make. Step 1, step 1A, step 2, step 2B, step 2BI. That's not a good sign of clear thought. That's a sign that you've taken a huge topic and you're now going to write a book about it. And for us, for our purposes, that's not the way that sales works. We need to choose really specific points. That's why all this research is important. That's why we want to know who we're speaking to, all that stuff with personas, with timing. It's so that we can then turn around and not give the person a general message. Instead, we can give them a specific point and we can build around that focus. So for example, if you want to send somebody an email with your selling points, it's not a good idea to hit them with 10 random selling points. Just choose one. That's the best way, in my opinion, to clean up your writing. It's to put constraints on those 3 areas. And I think that you would see immediate impact literally today if you start doing that. Step number 9, separate your writing from your editing. This one's really simple. Most people sit down at the computer, bang out whatever they have to bang out right before the deadline and send it in. Even professional writers, by the way. And that's really killer because it doesn't really get the best thing out of you. At best, you'll have a B work. Instead, if you write once, take a break, and then edit, I guarantee your material will be better and you will work faster. It's really surprising. If you sit down and edit once without pressure, without the pressure of perfectionism specifically, you'll just create a messy document with a lot of ideas floating around, but it'll come together and it'll come together quickly actually. Take a break. Could be a couple days, could be an hour. Go take a walk especially. I don't think that's a good idea, but just take a little break from the computer. Come back and then sit down to edit. And when you're editing, you're not in creative free mode anymore. You're sort of saying, oh, wait a minute, what's the point of this? Am I making the right point? Does this make sense? Does it flow logically? And does it flow with style? Is it clear what the reader should be doing next? If you can do those 3 things, so structure, logic, and clarity in terms of what's next, you will then naturally take care of the little stuff like typos and grammar, which, by the way, Google Docs or whatever you're writing in will probably pick up anyway for you. Focus on those 3 areas. Write once, edit once, and you should be in great shape. I guarantee you it'll be different than your current workflow if you're not already doing that. All right, and finally, we're at step 10, and that is to speak out loud as you're writing and read out loud as you're editing. This is one that is so easy to do, but many people feel a little bit awkward about it because you're sort of taught to read silently, I think, in school. I think that's the main reason. But it's really important to do this because when somebody is reading the material you're sending them, whether it's an email or a DM, they are essentially reading it out loud in their head, if that makes sense. So you want to recreate that voice a little bit. What does it sound like? I've written stuff where I think it comes across as really funny, but then somebody reading it with slightly different intonations might think that it's extremely offensive or extremely vague. So reading out loud is one of those things that will almost definitely clean up your creative process and just make you write a little bit more. I find it's a great way to write more quickly too. And then also clean up your editing process, similar to the last point. I would read out loud on both counts. If you want to team up with somebody on your team, you can even read out loud back and forth with each other, read each other's work out loud to that person. It's a great way to hear your writing in somebody else's voice, essentially. The way that I like doing this out in the wild is with an app called otter.ai. They have a free version. It's essentially a dictation tool where you can pop your headphones on, walk around with your phone, and just go for a walk and speak out loud and speak your emails out loud. What you'll end up with is a doc that, again, looks pretty messy. Remember what we talked about from the last step? The writing is supposed to be messy. And then when we go to clean up, you'll have a ton of material that's really good because it is spoken out loud as you create. There's no gray area for, the gray area is shrunk massively by doing that. Let's put it that way. So I would suggest speaking out loud as you write, speaking out loud as you edit, and even getting somebody else involved if possible. When we do these, our training sessions every week inside the Nest at Voris, we often do that. Actually, we do that with every email. We ask somebody else from a different team to read out loud, and it's a great way to get somebody else's vocalization, let's say, how somebody else would read your message. And it's the closest that we can come to getting into the prospect's head without really sitting next to them as they read something in their inbox. All right, so I hope those 10 steps were valuable and also practical enough for you to actually implement immediately. If you have any questions, you can find more about us over at voris.com, and we also have a newsletter that you can sign up for that will give you a lot of what we're doing inside of the Nest for free, and a bunch of resources also that you can download over at voris.com/resources.